meeting back to order.
I'm good.
Whole crew here.
All right, next we have the public hearing and ordinance for 750 Hinton Avenue rezoning. It's the first of two reading.
Mayor, City Council, tonight you'll be holding a public hearing requesting a rezoning of 750 Hinton Avenue. Sue Woodson of Hinton Avenue United Methodist Church is requesting a zoning map amendment to reclassify 750 Hinton Avenue from the existing R1S residential to NCC mixed use corridor with proffered development conditions. The rezoning is being requested to facilitate an addition to the existing Methodist church on site. The addition would accommodate up to 15 dwelling units. In addition, the following is being proffered. Residential density, no more than 15 dwelling units shall be permitted on the subject property. Affordable housing, a minimum of 4 residential units within multifamily dwelling buildings on the subject property shall be restricted to residents with income at 80% or less of area median income, AMI, as defined by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development for the Charlottesville, Virginia metro area. Resident safety, access to all interior common areas serving residential units shall be controlled through the use of entry locks. Use, all non-residential uses other than educational facilities and daycare facilities which are not associated to house of worship or residential use located on the subject property shall not be permitted on the subject property. Access, permanent vehicular ingress and egress to the subject property shall be restricted to Rialto Street, provided that the restriction on vehicle access shall not take effect until such time as building permit is issued for construction of any multifamily building. The city may require any site plan for multifamily building proposed on the subject property to adhere to vehicular ingress and egress limited under these conditions. Height restrictions, maximum height of 38 feet. Street wall regulations as follows. Primary street frontage, 6 feet minimum required, 10 feet maximum. On June 11, 2019, the Planning Commission held a public hearing where 26 members of the public spoke. Ongoing problems with the residents in the area, with businesses operating in the NCC zone, especially the impact of noise and traffic, concerns about the city's ability to enforce proffers, the expansion of NCC zoning beyond its current boundaries, concerns about noise from the HVAC equipment on the new facility, concern about traffic impacts, concern about applicants' vision of serving the developmentally disabled not being guaranteed, and the city's need for overall housing, especially housing for underdeserved populations, were all discussed at that meeting. The Planning Commission voted 6-0 to recommend City Council approve the rezoning application. With that, I'm free to answer any questions or refer you to a staff member that can. And prior to you starting the public hearing, the applicant has asked for a few minutes to speak.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions? All right.
I do have one, Mayor Walker. With regards to the issue of the enforcement of proffers, when I wrote a question to Brian Haluska last week, he made a distinction between 2 different kinds of proffers. Those are the proffers that were going to be kind of memorialized in a site plan and were part of the physical character of the project itself. And then there were proffers that were more dealing with operations, for example, noise ordinance issues. Can you speak to that at all? My feeling was that most of the proffers in this particular project were all going to be handled in the site plan level so that they would be part of the physical build out. And it wasn't a matter of operations.
Correct. You have proffers that are very visible, think buffers, things that you would see on a site plan that you can definitely review prior to issuing approval of a site plan. Then you do have proffers which are more ongoing proffers, things like noise, that would be handled more in zoning through complaint.
So one's physical form, the other one's going to be an enforcement question that we handle through management.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Okay.
Have the applicant come up and speak.
Good evening. I'm Kim Crater. I'm with the Charlottesville District of the United Methodist Church. We want to build a 15-unit apartment building called Rachel's Haven, where 4 to 6 of the units will be set aside for people with developmental disabilities. You are receiving a letter now, 2 letters actually, from nonprofits that we are exploring partnerships with. And I share these letters as evidence that we are indeed sincere in our intention to provide housing for people with developmental disabilities, despite our lack of a proffer to that effect. Now, I would like to invite people in the audience who are in support of the rezoning for Rachel's Haven to please stand. We have proffered that 4 of our apartments will be affordable units, but we will apply for low-income housing tax credits, and if we receive these tax credits, we intend to offer all 15 of the apartments as affordable units. It is our hope to have 100% affordable housing. No zoning designation fits our project perfectly. We feel that NCC is the closest fit, but we understand that NCC hasn't been welcome in Belmont. So in response to neighborhood concerns, we have proffered all non-residential commercial activity except for daycare and educational uses. We have waived all rights for other commercial uses because our goal is to serve people with developmental disabilities. It is ministry. Even with our proffers, though, at least a few people are still concerned that commercial uses could occur on the property should the church ever close its doors. 2 points about this are that, first, should the church close, the property would revert to the Virginia Conference of the United Methodist Church, which is essentially our statewide organization. The Virginia Conference would then be required to look for another ministry use for the property or find a nonprofit or organization that has values and a mission consistent with the church's. Although I cannot say that there is no possibility that this property would ever leave the denomination, I can say that I believe that possibility to be very remote. And second, should that somehow ever happen, the proffers that we have written apply not only to ourselves, but also to any future owners. Regardless of who owns the property, commercial uses will not be an option. We intend for Rachel's Haven to be managed in a way that allows it to be a blessing not only for our neighbors with developmental disabilities and our low-income neighbors, but also for our Belmont neighbors. These may seem like hollow words until I remind you that Rachel's Haven's closest neighbor is the church. Just as our Belmont neighbors don't want amplified music or at all hours of the night or crazy HVAC noise, neither does the congregation. And as a matter of fact, I anticipate that neither do our future residents. I will close by saying that our ministry aligns perfectly with the comprehensive plan, which has goals for increasing affordable housing and housing for underserved populations. Meeting any goal, however, whether it is affordable housing or weight loss, requires hard choices. We have done everything we can to address the neighborhood's concerns and take the frightening aspects out of NCC. After you consider our proffers, if any concerns remain, please ask yourself whether they are significant enough to trump the concerns of our low-income neighbors and people with developmental disabilities. I will now turn it over to our architect, Andy Thomas.
Thank you, Kim. Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
I'm Andy Thomas, an architect here in Charlottesville. I am here to speak on behalf of the vision team for the Rachel's Haven project and its rezoning petition. I wanted to say how honored I am to to be included as a helper on this project. The Vision Team is a group of volunteers who continually demonstrate to me how committed they are to helping this population and their families find a home. The project site is the Hinton Avenue United Methodist Church. The team wants to add the residential use by renovating and adding to the existing education wing of the building. The architectural concept adds to the residential character of this context. Some of the planned features include a building addition that will enhance the existing pedestrian experience and with a separate entrance and identity from the church. Also included is a residential scaled courtyard, a landscaped and screened parking area, and a building that mediates between the scale of the church and the surrounding neighborhood. While the parking concept follows the city's zoning code standards for church and residence parking, it is likely many of the residents will not be high users of single occupancy cars. The Hinton Avenue Church site is well placed for transportation, jobs, and services. It is important to note that the church plans to be part of and continue to serve the community as it has done historically. The requested rezoning to NCC zone best accomplishes the goals of this project because it provides a mixed use of the multifamily housing and the church uses, and a setback envelope that best mirrors the existing church building and context. For this request, the NCC zone has been modified to tailor the zone for this project as follows. Number one, a provision for limited residential density. No more than 15 dwelling units shall be permitted on the property. Number two, provides for affordable housing, providing a minimum of 4 residential units within the multi-family dwelling building. Proffer 4, during several open meetings we hosted for the neighborhood, we heard concern expressed by the neighbors that any commercial use is unwanted. The church wanted to be responsive to its neighbors and includes a revised proffer that removes commercial use. Proffers 6 and 7 further restrict the new building envelope, including a maximum height of 38 feet, and includes both a minimum 6-foot and maximum 10-foot setback from the primary street. These revisions are in line with the residential scale concept for the project and support the contextual design vision. The housing chapter of the Charlottesville Comp Plan 2013 sets goals that include to accommodate the housing needs of low-income households, seniors, and those with disabilities. And it supports those with challenges that would otherwise prevent independent living. The main goal of this project, providing independent living for those with developmental disabilities, puts it squarely in line with these goals of the Charlottesville Comp Plan. The NCC zone, as modified to exclude commercial uses, is a good match for the church and residential mixed use for this site. This modified NCC zone makes a good model for institutional properties seeking to incorporate some residential space. I encourage you to consider the goals of the comp plan and approve the rezoning of this property. Hinton Avenue Church is a longtime Charlottesville community member and asked to be allowed to donate some of its property and its services for this dramatically underserved population. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council?
I did have a question around the LIHTC timing question. So it was my understanding that you are going to be applying for that in this next cycle if this is approved.
We hope to, if we can get the site plan.
If you could come back up and.
I'm sorry, Kim.
We hope to apply at the next cycle, March, if the site plan and everything else can be approved in time.
So it's my understanding that once you do submit, there's a certain timeline then that automatically is in place if you're going to be pursuing it through a LIHTC, supported
Right.
project. And so then there is a timeline, because I know right now the timeline seems uncertain, But you're saying, so you are committing that you will, once that LIHTC approval process happens, it's a pretty
Yeah,
immediate
if it gets approved, yeah, we're on course,
Okay.
and we can't stop the train at that point.
Right, okay.
And just the same comment I made during the planning commission meeting, just about the 80% AMI and the, need in the city for the focus to be below that, and just however you all, and whatever conversations around that you can get to, just committing to is, I think, very important.
Yeah, I believe the intention, although 80% is the proffer, the intention is to serve lower than that. And the nonprofit that we've been talking to, who knows all about LIHTC and is managing affordable housing currently, they're in the 40 to 60% range. And so that's what we expect for ours if the LIHTC comes through.
So one question, sorry, may I get more? Two questions specifically for me. It's great to hear you say that you all are exploring and looking towards the 40 to 60%. I would love to see that in writing in some regards, so that it is an official kind of plan. We have developers, and not putting you in or lumping you in with others, but we have individuals who come forth before us all the time who say, yeah, we want to do 30%, we want to look at 50%, but then in all actuality, they look at going at 80, or they don't even have affordable housing units at all. So seeing that in writing would be prudent for me. Secondly, in regards to the affordable housing units, the amount in which you all have designated 5 units, is there a reason why there aren't more?
Yes, because we haven't been given the low-income housing tax credits yet. So if we don't have that, we have to look at other ways to fund this project. And we put the 4 affordable units in there because we know that this whole project is for people with developmental disabilities, and we are absolutely sure that those folks in those apartments are going to need affordable housing, and they are more like at the 30 to 40% AMI.
But then, forgive my ignorance, because I'm just drawing a blank. So what would be the expected rent amount for the remaining units?
Are you able to help answer that, Jen?
LIHTC grants are based on.
If you could come up.
This is Jen Fitzgerald. Yeah. She's Director of Community Services Housing, and she's one of the partners we've been talking with.
And just, I'm aware of the LIHTC unit requirements, but I think it would be still good for the public to hear that. But in the event in which you do not receive the LIHTC tax credits, what would your expected rent be?
We do LIHTC housing, so we would have to do a LIHTC project.
For that partner.
Right, right.
Great. I just wanted to be safe.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
So if they weren't your partner, and you didn't receive the LIHTC approval, then what's the plan?
We come up with a plan B. The reality is that we need a partner who is an expert in housing. We also need a partner who is an expert in working with people with developmental disabilities. We have this amazing vision and this dream, but we don't have the expertise, which is why we've been starting these partnerships. So if it's not this organization, it will have to be somebody who has the expertise in how to do this.
Okay. All right. Any other question? All right.
I guess just again to clarify though, if you don't get the LIHTC, it's not your vision that then the 11 units that's the balance of the total units once you have reserved the 4. Your vision is not that those are market rate units, or is that an option as well if you don't get LIHTC?
I'm not going to say that that's not an option, because that has been an option for us in the past, back when we didn't understand how much LIHTC could bring to the table. Now that we see what it can do, I really feel like that's the best way to get this project to the finish line. But I can't say, I guess I'm not ready at this point to say that there is no scenario where there wouldn't be market rate apartments.
But as it is, 4 units, which is almost 25%, 20 to 25% of your units you are going to be reserving in some way, somehow,
Yes,
as a minimum, will be affordable
Yes.
units.
absolutely.
And that's in a profit.
Yeah, that's been proffered.
Okay.
Yep.
And is it 4 to 6 or just the 4?
It's just 4.
Okay. All right. Mike, did you have a? Okay. All right, thank you. So we're going to open the public hearing, and we're going to limit the time to 2 minutes. We understand that we have 25 people signed up, it looks like. If you need to speak longer, just be aware that I was at the Planning Commission meeting, so I heard a lot of you. The other counselors have watched the meeting, and we understand it wasn't announced at 2 minutes, but because there are a lot, we're asking you if you can speak in the 2-minute time frame to please do so. And if not, 3 minutes will be allowed. We have Vicky Bravo.
Hi, I'm with Impact, our local interfaith group of 27 faith congregations of different faiths who work on solving community problems. We've been working on affordable housing for the last 2 years in the city. We all know the data. We all know that we need housing, we need affordable housing, and we need housing that will enable people with developmental disabilities to live independently and with dignity. A lot of those people are in our 27 congregations. Impact supports this proposal, and we also want to recognize and thank the Methodist Church for standing up as citizens, seeing a need, and doing something to meet it, putting in the work, giving the land, offering to build the apartments. It's a real gift to Charlottesville, and we think it's a wonderful example of Charlottesville at its best. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Dunn.
Good evening. My name is Mike Dunn. In 1997, my son was born just a few blocks from here in what used to be Martha Jefferson Hospital. As I held him in my arms that first night, I dreamed the dreams that all parents dream for their children. I dreamed of music lessons in his future, maybe sports, maybe a college scholarship. And the biggest dream of all, raising a child who could make his way confidently through the world and be a force for good. The autism diagnosis that he received when he was about 6 years old upended those dreams. Our lives became an endless series of appointments with specialists, psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, and on for years. And it's 22 years on now. He's an adult, and he's one with a paradoxical constellation of gifts and deficits. He can write beautiful short stories, and he can't tie his shoelaces. He wants to travel the world, and he can't drive a car. He wants to set up housekeeping on his own, and he fears boiling a pot of cooking water. Nonetheless, my wife and I walk the walk with him each and every day of our lives. We take him where he needs to go. We do his grocery shopping for him. We see to his grooming. And this is a walk that scores of parents in this area walk with their adult children each and every day of their lives. The mirror tells us that we're getting older each and every day of our lives. And the day is going to come when first one and then the other of us can't walk this walk anymore. And what then? That's why the idea of Rachel's Haven has reignited dreams for families like ours. Dreams where adults with developmental disabilities are in a supportive community. Dreams where they're integrated into the life of Charlottesville. Dreams where families like ours can rest a little easier, knowing that maybe in the long run, things will be okay for our loved ones. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lucius Bracy.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Lucius Bracy. I live at 724 Northwood Avenue, Charlottesville, Virginia. Together with Elaine Oakey as trustee, we own 759 Belmont Avenue. This is going to be a very surprising opening, but we wish the church the best in this venture. It's not really fair to say it's a venture. We're not opposed to housing. We're not opposed to housing for the disabled. We're not opposed to affordable housing. And we wish the church very well and hope that they succeed in all their efforts. Indeed, all of their markers for success and our markers for success line up perfectly with one exception. We don't want the fallback in case they're not successful. We don't want the fallback to be neighborhood commercial corridor zoning. We want it to be R4. That would, I think any of us would not want to subject ourselves to constant worry about the profits not working or this facility not working financially. We understand there is some concern about setbacks and waivers of setbacks, but those concerns are probably no greater than the validity of profits and the enforceability of profits and the ability of the city to enforce the profits anyway. So we ask simply that we all support the church and its objectives, but fix this so if it's not successful, we won't have a spot of commercial usage in the midst of the houses that are so treasured by the people who have built them and live there now. And all of their objectives are consistent with the comp plan, as is the church's. Thank you.
So Susan Manassi, I'm just now realizing I've never said your last name.
No problem. Good evening, Mayor Walker and
Good
City
evening.
Council. My name is Susan Manasian. I'm the pastor of Sojourners United Church of Christ that is a neighbor of Hinton Avenue United Methodist Church. The Neighborhood Connections section of the Planning Commission section on the city website states its vision and two goals specifically relevant here: to make Charlottesville a city where every neighborhood has the opportunity to succeed in realizing its full potential, for contributing to a quality community, to foster independent problem solving and sharing of assets within and among neighborhoods, to involve all community assets in expanding and sustaining safe and healthy neighborhoods. Your own city council vision statement speaks of quality housing opportunities for all our neighborhoods to retain, yes, the historic fabric, but offering housing that is affordable and attainable for people of all income levels, racial backgrounds, life stages, and abilities. If all of this is true, and if these statements describing our community values, purpose, and intention are true, then I don't see how you cannot affirm with gratitude the Rachel's Haven of Hinton Avenue United Methodist Church proposal. At the first hearing with the Planning Commission, I listened to the concerns of our other neighbors. It is disappointing that the only comments reported this evening about that meeting were comments that were made by neighbors that had difficulty with the project and not those of us that were in support of it. The concerns I heard about issues are things that are already problematic, which have not been addressed, and to me sound like old news before I moved here 2 years ago. So I would like to suggest that the neighborhood organization and residents collaborate with you to creatively come up with solutions to those issues and move forward so that the long-lasting issues will not continue to be confused with this proposal. And then those concerns can be removed as a barrier for the project. The welfare of the city and underserved residents who desperately need this housing should be your priority. I ask as one of their neighbors that the City Council promote the values you support on record and employ those values in your unanimous affirmative vote. I will add, not to embarrass my congregation, but just to make a statement of reality, that half of my net income goes to housing, and I live in Albemarle County instead of the city because I can't afford to live in the city. I would love to live in the city of Charlottesville, but it is extremely expensive. And I'm somebody of tremendous privilege, tremendous agency, and a lot of tenacity. I hope you will pass this unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Lewis.
I'm Robert Lewis. I'm pastor of Hinton Avenue, and I live on Melbourne Road. Counselors, I know all of you. I have talked with you, worshiped with you, walked with you, learned with you, stood in the streets and protected this city with you. And you know that I am someone who has heard the cries of our neighbors, has understood the injustices, the wrongs, the efforts to do all that we can to make things right. And frankly, I know that everybody in this room is here because they care so very much and want to make things right. We so often have so much difficulty figuring out how to do that together, but we all want to do that. I'm here to share with you that this is not a ministry of Hinton Avenue United Methodist Church, at least not yet. It is a ministry of more than 75 United Methodist churches in the Charlottesville district. Hinton Avenue is the one congregation that said, we have a building that we're not good stewards of. And that thing that they're trying to do, why couldn't it happen here? We have been trying to make this project go for the last 3 or 4 years, and we are not developers. We don't know what we're doing. We are scrabbling and scraping in every way to figure out how to take this vision of ministry that God has given us and to make it real. We're not trying to build an apartment building. If we don't get the funding, if we don't get the zoning, we're not going to build an apartment building. We are trying to provide housing and support for people with intellectual disabilities, and as much as it is a financially viable model for as many other people who need affordable housing as we can. And if we can't do that, we won't do anything. It's easy to be an armchair quarterback and to say that the way that you've put the proposal together and the zoning codes and the this and the that are not the way I would want to see it. But frankly, we're working within the model that we've got. And until we can change that model, we have to pull together to do what we can. I would ask you tonight, if you can't vote in support of this proposal, what plan will you put forward to provide housing and support for the desperately needy people with intellectual disabilities in our community? Thank you.
Kate Fincham. Good evening.
I'm Kate Fincham. I live at 906 Monticello Avenue. I've been in the city only 4 years, came here after retirement and absolutely love it. And I certainly applaud this endeavor to provide much needed affordable housing for our community. The one thing I would ask the council to do is your due diligence to make sure that the residents already living in the area don't suffer too much from things like the parking. When you talk of perhaps 10 units in that building being marketplace value, they could have as many as 4 people in a 2-bedroom, could be 4 cars per unit. I mean, where do they go? So I don't know how much those issues are addressed in the practical side of their proposal, but I think the council needs to raise those issues. And the same with the zoning. Would it be possible to consider the R4 zoning? My concern with that is, would other locations in that vicinity start applying for NCC status to redo their properties? So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy Carpenter?
Good evening, Nancy Carpenter, city resident. I'm here speaking on behalf of supporting the rezoning for this piece of property. It took us many decades to get into this position of where people who want to live in the city can't. People who are living in the city can barely live in the city, and those who have a lot of money seem to run the city. So it would be nice to be able to start at some point to try and rectify the issues with people having affordability. And the gentleman's story about his son resonates with me because there are a lot of people out there that I hear, they want to know what's going to happen to their adult children when they can no longer help, and to have at least 4, maybe 10. CSH is well known for their work with getting LIHTC approved for properties. This is not their first rodeo, so I have confidence that they could carry through and perhaps get that for this development. But we do need to start doing it, and it, you know, if it's like ripping a Band-Aid off. I guess it might hurt a little bit, but once you do it and things begin to heal, it's not so bad. And this is certainly a population that does need to have everybody's care and concern about. And if it's some of them market rate, well, you know, a lot of people aren't buying cars anymore. That's why this is summertime. You see all these car sales. People don't buy cars and trucks like they used to. So parking and cars and traffic will exist, maybe not there. So thank you.
Thank you. Sue Woodson.
Good evening. My name is Sue Woodson. My name is on the application, but it is my privilege to represent the United Methodist Church in this endeavor. My husband and I joined Hinton Avenue Church 25 years ago, and we were attracted to this church because at that time I was working as the Community Health Outreach Coordinator for Women's Health Services at the University of Virginia. The minister of the church at that time came to the organizational meeting and said, "I have a very large church in the center of Charlottesville, and it is half empty. I want to open it to the use of the community. Let's have a health fair there." And we did. It was huge. Many of you may have attended. At that time, my husband and I thought, we want to be part of people who are concerned for their fellow man, for their neighbors. And since that time, in the small congregation, we're reminded many times of what Jesus accomplished with only 12 disciples. We're small but mighty. Our church currently provides facilities for AA meetings, NA meetings, a closed closet, a soup kitchen for families every Sunday, a food pantry, the Boy Scouts, meeting spaces for the local Liberian church. We are participants in the Community ID program. We are not wealthy. We find ways to support these programs, not only through our offering, but several members of our community church, of our church organization, joined together and purchased a house adjacent to the church. We use income from that rental to help support our endeavors. We also lease space to the international school to help support our church endeavors. We are the proud stewards of a wonderful spot of land here in the center of Charlottesville. We would like to offer it to our community to use for Rachel's Haven, to help offer housing for the disadvantaged in our community. We didn't wake up last night and decide we wanted to put up an apartment project. We are answering the call that has been placed in before us. We ask that you help us reach that vision. Thank you.
Mariana Dunn.
Thank you very much. Everybody that's come out tonight to speak about this church and this apartment have come for the same reason. All of us have the same reason for being here. We all love Belmont. We all want to keep Belmont beautiful, safe, and walkable. We want the same thing. The people who are residents want to maintain the peace, quiet, and calm that draws them there. Those people who have disabilities or love people with disabilities want a place that is calm, quiet, and safe too. I know that because I love someone with a developmental disability. The word developmental disability is not synonymous with intellectual disability. It's an umbrella word. It accomplishes a variety of abilities, but a variety of challenges as well. My son is able to maintain a 3.0 at Piedmont and work in the community, but he's afraid to cross the street. He is afraid to be alone. I have to look at my notes. I don't really have to look at my notes. I know what I want to say. He needs quiet. He needs safety, security, and walkability. Belmont needs that. We're on the same team. The best Charlottesville and Belmont can be is all those things, and affordable, and inclusion, and welcoming. And I'm standing here tonight to ask Belmont and Charlottesville to be welcoming. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Krebs.
Good evening. Thank you. My name's Bob Krebs. My wife and I are parents of a young adult daughter with autism. Autism is one of many developmental disabilities representative of the population that the Hinton Avenue Project is planning to serve. I'm also the leadership chair of the Charlottesville Region Autism Advocacy Group, representing scores of parents and individuals with developmental disabilities, self-advocates, and providers. Our focus is on finding lifespan solutions to enable individuals with developmental disabilities lead fulfilling lives in a safe and supportive environment while maximizing their independence and their contribution to society to the best of their ability. Over the past year, affordable housing advocates have done an excellent job of raising awareness in the community. Missing from the conversation, however, are the unique needs of individuals with developmental disabilities. In addition to having low or no income, these individuals are in need of services in a supportive environment where they can lead fulfilling lives safely, side by side, integrated with regular people in the community not having disabilities. The Hinton Avenue Project represents a perfect solution to this challenge. If approved and replicated by other developer-provider partnerships, it can materially change the lives of many individuals who, through no fault of their own, are in need of supportive services through life's journey. Over 300 individuals in Charlottesville and surrounding area are on the wait list for state-supported waiver services. In addition, there are those who have services that do not have adequate housing and supports due to capacity and affordability issues. As our parents, our job is to position our children to thrive in life to the best of their ability. We all strive to do this the best we can until we can't. And at that point, we wonder what's going to happen when we're gone. Hinton Avenue Project is a breath of fresh air, meets the goals of the comprehensive plan to create more affordable housing and housing for underserved populations. Developmental disabilities are one such underserved population. The city is serious about meeting the goals you have set forth. This project, and hopefully others like it in the future, must be approved. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. Carol Starling.
Hi, I live at 759 Belmont Avenue.
Good evening.
I am here to read a letter from Shirley Shotwell, a neighbor who's lived in Belmont since 1972. She's been an advocate for over 15 years, and she's seen what happens when this NCC comes in. She's been there since the beginning NCC was passed. She said that she thought that the city had stated that the 815 Hinton Avenue would be logical endpoint for the NCC, but we in Belmont do not want NCC to grow. The effect The NCC here on Douglas Avenue has been terrible. I've been a resident of Charlottesville since 1972, and the family has a long history of personal financial investment, as many do, in the neighborhood, and they've seen it grow, and they've seen it, they've seen their families grow there. They've also seen the effects of the NCC corridor, mainly because the companies, the restaurants that have come in, have proffered certain things, and they are not keeping their word on it. We've got, none of these restaurants offer any parking whatsoever. We have mostly on-street parking in our neighborhood, and this really makes a problem for all of us. And then, excuse me, and of course, I'm not going to go into all the things that they did necessarily. I will send this around to everyone, their letter from Miss Shirley. She's been dealing with the noise in the neighborhood that makes it very difficult for her and other people with children to live and, you know, do their homework, get some sleep. She talks about of the other ones, the La Taza Del Rio, other ones that, restaurants, some that are gone now, that have broken all these rules, been very unruly and noisy. The parking is, not only is it a problem, we don't have any handicap parking whatsoever. And then some of these restaurants have vans that, instead of putting in behind their lot, or like, for instance, the Junction, who built a parking lot, tore down a bunch of trees, built a parking lot, doesn't even use it, and parks on Douglas Street. They also park in front of hydrants. They never get ticketed. They come and they ask people in the restaurant to please move their car so they're not getting any kind of fines or being punished for it. Same thing goes whenever there's a noise problem. Call the police. They call the restaurant. Immediately the noise goes down, and by the time they get there, nothing is fine. All we are for this church. We're for the disabled. We're for these apartments. We just want it to be an R3, no more NCC. We just don't trust it, and we want to see the disabled in the writing, and also affordable housing in writing in this, and not just saying we will do this if we can, like Mr. Bellamy said. Okay, thank you.
Allison, it looks like Puffman, maybe. I can't read the writing for the last name.
Ma'am, would you like some water? You good? Oh, got your own water, all right. You don't want my water. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. It's a long night. We gotta have some jokes up here somehow or something.
You're calling me Allison Ruffner?
Okay, couldn't read that.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Oh, well. So my name is Allison Ruffner, and I actually do now live in the county. I live in the county because I lived in Belmont for almost 20 years, and I had 2 houses there. The first one on Douglas, and the second house was on Grave Street. And I left predominantly because of the NCC district. I am also the daughter of a disabled woman. She too, well, my grandparents faced a lot of the challenges that you've heard spoken tonight, and I totally understand the concerns of parents with disabled children. My mother just had 2 very willful parents and very capable parents, and way outperformed, and was a school teacher for over 40 years, had 3 children, and is now retired. And so now we as her children are worried about her. So I think tonight, as I think about what I'd like the council to consider the goals and what it is we're actually trying to achieve. Because while I absolutely support what this church is trying to do, 4 houses seems rather shy for residential properties, for what is quite a large undertaking, and places at risk a community that has suffered a negative impact from a particular districting. And I think what's really in question here is the districting, and why the city uses that, and that is the city's goal, because the city proffered that or suggested that to achieve their goal, and we have their goal of peace being affected by it. Now, as the daughter of a disabled person, I can tell you my mother did not visit me anymore because it became so unnavigable for anybody that was disabled. For her to get there, to do anything, forget it. So I had to leave. So my mom can now visit me. She can come to my house for dinner. I can take care of her. So when you're thinking about what your goals are here, it's not saying don't have something like this. It's saying how you do it and what you choose to do it has a much wider impact. And if your goal is to help disabled people, in this case we're talking about people that have some mental disabilities, you better be sure that what you're doing actually achieves that, and that what's in place here is going to support that. It's a great endeavor. I want them to be successful, but I don't want to see everybody else negatively impacted and that true goal fail because we choose the wrong districting. Thank you.
Thank you. Charles Gendrell.
Thank you to hear us tonight. My name is Charles Gendreau. I'm living at 709 Melmont Avenue. To begin, yes, to pass along. To begin, please find a better date in the future for this important rezoning matters. Very important. This is the third time important rezoning matters have been rescheduled around July 4th. This application, Little High, 814 Hinton NCC flip that NDS and the city assured us was the logical endpoint for the NCC in Belmont. The failed process reflects a failing system. It is the same system that the Planning Commission threw up in their hand and decided to trust. Even though they admitted that zoning was clumsy and stated that they had to work with the tools they had. However, we all learn in first grade that such defeatist and laissez-faire attitude doesn't work. When your tools don't work, you find better ones, and you work smarter. As the city assistant stated publicly on April 9th, the city doesn't like to enforce SUPs or zoning. So how can an advisory or government body sit back and use the excuse of trusting profiles and trusting an NCC system that has failed us for 15 years and more? Such dysfunctional thinking leaves one dumbfounded. If you had a hammer with no heads, would you keep walking away with the wooden handle? The NCC only serves the money interest of the restaurants and the city. It certainly has not served the residents as families have left, and because of it, and the elderly and neighbors with disability have suffered, as Shirley letter proves. As you know, there is a clear non-enforcement of profiles by police, and certainly by NDS. We have even been told that profiles in and of themselves may be not enforceable in our state. That's why we simply cannot, won't trust profiles and NCC. Neighborhood commercial corridor code definition. This is our law, local law. The intent of the neighborhood commercial corridor district is to establish a zoning classification for the Fontaine and Belmont commercial areas that recognize their compact nature, their pedestrian orientation, and the small neighborhood nature of the businesses. This zoning district recognizes the area as small town center type commercial areas and provides for the ability to develop on small lots and minimal parking.
Thank you.
So, the NCC zoning being pushed clearly.
Can you just introduce yourself?
I'm sorry.
She's next.
Kimber Hockey, and we live together at 709 Belmont. First of all, everything that, again, we don't disapprove of the project, it's the zoning. We want the disabilities put clearly in black and white, as well as all the affordability. There's been mention of 100% affordability. Put it in black and white. We've also suggested people with physical problems or elderly be added. We would love the whole thing to be that way. But this NCZ zoning that's being pushed, it shows that we're being confronted by the outside forces of money in the city. One thing about speaking up, despite all of this, Mrs. Walker, you recently stated that a community member was being sued for defamation, and that defamation apparently equates to asking critical questions and being willing to challenge systems. And you told us, please ask questions of your neighbors and refuse to be silenced. We are questioning this system. This system is not working, and it hasn't worked for 15 years for people in Belmont. And if, in fact, the church cares about neighbors, then do the zoning correctly. There are alternatives. Modified R3, or R4, I don't know what the heck that is, but do something different that is not going to threaten us and our way of life. It's that simple. As far as, for example, a parking concern, there's 27 parking spaces, but there's 15 units. 15 units is not 15 people. 15 units at a minimum is 30 people at 1 person per bedroom. It could be 60 people for 2 people per bedroom, or 90 people at 3 per bedroom. If you put UVA students in there, they're going to put 3 people in a bedroom just to be downtown. But 27 parking spaces. When we asked about this kind of thing to the applicant, they said there was no way they can control how many people were in a unit. So there's problems like that exist. And so these things have to be addressed. The application itself, as you read the NCC code, goes against it. It is not a small lot, it is not compact, and it will have a significant impact. We are willing to absorb that impact because, again, we want the housing for disabled. However, you cannot ask us to take this NCC zoning, especially after the 15-year history that we've gone through with promises. We've heard all the same things. Go back and listen to the Planning Commission meeting for the Southern Crescent. Go back and listen to what the council said to us. All the promises, Dave Norris, nothing will happen without neighbor input. They're going to be a model, blah, blah, blah. Just do it. And this has not worked, so we cannot accept the NCC. Proffers haven't worked. They violated their proffers since day one. NDS does nothing. The only reason they started to do something recently is because we caused such an outcry. The police will not enforce proffers. There's no one to call at NDS after 5 o'clock at night. We've asked them for their personal phone numbers. They won't give them to us. So this has to stop here. We hired a lot of you here specifically, Madam Mayor, you specifically as well, to change this paradigm where we just accept the money interest, because NCC means money.
Okay.
Thank you.
Gary Bibb.
Gary Bibb from Albemarle County. I'd like to welcome all you new people to Belmont. Dang, it's good to have you here. I was raised in Belmont. I was born 1950 on Little Grave Street. I took papers to the houses you guys live in, but I don't remember any of you living there then. The reality is, Belmont hadn't really changed. Monticello Road is still packed with cars. Downtown Belmont has expanded by one house, Southern Crescent. It was always a commercial district right there. And it's really nicer now than it was back in the 60s.
Yeah, you don't live there.
No, I don't. It was my choice. And in the 70s, most of the people who went to Hinton Avenue United Methodist Church decided it was their choice to leave as well. It was not a great place to live. And I am so happy to see that things that has happened in our city, downtown, the vibrance of Belmont, which makes all y'all's real estate increase in value. You know, it's been good, and we do appreciate your concerns. It comes from proffers that are not being properly enforced. That's not our problem. You know, that's you guys' jobs. So we ask you to take the opportunity that is now before you, that you can take real estate that's free. We're giving the real estate away. We're giving it for a purpose where there's a huge need for a great reason, and it's a ministry. This is not driven by money at all. So I hope that you'll make the right decision, and I appreciate your concerns with the zoning, but I don't honestly understand all that. I just know that Charlottesville has rules that makes it very difficult to do certain things, and you don't mean to make it that way. You try to make the rules right, try to make the laws right. It's just that not everything fits in nice little cubby holes. So we ask you, take this opportunity to fill this need for housing for disabled people, affordable housing. You can't get cheaper than free land. Thank you.
Thank you. Eleanor Biasioli.
Good evening. I'm Eleanor Biasioli. I live at 622 Evergreen Avenue, and I'm a joint owner of a rental property at 813 Belmont Avenue since 1992. I attended the meeting at Hinton Church. It was the Thursday before the Planning Commission meeting that we had this month. And I was there to find out more information, and two questions I had when I heard they were applying for some kind of tax credits or some way of being able to finance this. So I said, who is going to own the apartments after they're built? Will they be owned by the church? Will they be owned by the nonprofit? Or are they going to be jointly owned? And I was told that they didn't know at that point. So the whole question of, I'm bringing this up because I think we need to ask those kind of questions rather than find out about it down the road. So that was one issue I had. Who's the owner? Because we were on hearing that the Methodist Church will be guarantor of this property down the roads. Is it just the church they're the guarantor, or is there something in this financing that's going on that doesn't give them control over the apartments, that they have the right to do, that something else is not going to get in the way? The second question I asked was, because the woman from the nonprofit was there that night, and she's going to be handling the application process and getting people for the apartments. And I asked her, I said, well, how are you going to go about selecting them? How will you know what their disability is? Because there's so many different disabilities, and the vision is to have the developmentally disabled there. So I was shocked when she said, I'm not going to be asking them what their disability is. They don't write it down what their disability is. It's not part of the application process. Well, I have two nephews that are in assisted housing. One's in his late 40s, the other's in his 50s. They'll be living in housing for the rest of their lives. And so I've sat in on their IEP meetings. So I know a lot of you know that an IEP stands for an individual education plan. And I thought, wow, you need to have an individual education plan on all of these people that you're admitting to know how you're going to deal with. You know, what are their needs in here? And hearing that I'm not going to ask what their disability is. So I asked Kim Crater, I said, so it possibly could happen that there's not going to be any developmentally disabled people. That's a possibility in these four. And she said that might happen. So the next morning, that was Friday, I called the Faison residents. That's the model that they're using for this housing project. It's down in Richmond, there's 45. They have an extensive application process. They require the IEP. They require tons of information. They know it all. They have a committee that sits down and evaluates who gets into the housing. So I think this project has just moved along too quickly in terms of not getting all these things flushed out.
Thank you. Frank Biasioli.
Thank you. My name is Frank Biasioli. I live at 622 Evergreen Avenue, and I'm a part owner of property in Belmont as well. I would like to say that I also, as so many people, I believe everybody here tonight, is in favor of the vision that Hinton Avenue Methodist Church has. But there are serious problems with the zoning that's in there, and I think that's a problem that needs to be addressed by the counselors, the planning department, and the zoning department. Why, the real serious question is why was so much effort pushed into using a zoning option, and not just simply a zoning option, but a comprised with proffers that were given under duress. Brian Haluska said that he would not have voted in favor of the project if they had not surrendered commercial activity there. I really think that, and my wife has raised other issues about how there's still issues still to be resolved, that they're being promised but can't be promised because sufficient information is not yet available. So I think that the best thing to do, I'm recommending strongly that you step back and have the church step back, help you work through a zoning that's appropriate for the Hinton Avenue project, and realize that church attendance in this country has gone down significantly in the last 50 years, 30 years particularly, but it was likely to continue. The viability of churches is likely to go down. They're going to need to do something. They're changing their vision to probably something like going on in the Hinton Avenue. I don't think we want to sprinkle commercial zoning for churches throughout the city because we have not developed appropriate residential zoning for properties like this or for projects like this. And the church has made promises that they will, even if they failed, that their director or the conference will take over and commit to that. All I can say is about promises. You get promises if you see what's happened in the prior zoning area on Hinton Avenue. Lots of promises were made. My perspective on promises is that promises are to be forgotten and that proffers are to be gamed. The proffers that have been given down in the other place on Hinton Avenue have been violated so repeatedly and so directly, and it's so hard to get them addressed, the proffers, that I have real questions that proffers is the way to go. I think a new purchaser of this property will look at it and say, these proffers were so restricted my ability as a commercial owner to do anything here and they were gendered under duress, that I'm going to sue to have them rejected and to allow me to go into business and do this appropriately. Thank you.
Kristen Sakis.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Kristen Sakis. I live on Otter Street in the city. And I'm here as a parent of an adult child with developmental disabilities who lives in Chesterfield County, 2 hours away, because there's so little affordable supported housing in Charlottesville. I'm here as a former city councilor who served as on the Housing Advisory Committee and helped to craft the city's strategic plan and comprehensive plan, particularly the parts around affordability. And I'm here as a neighbor, a person who cares about this community and what we believe in. I know that this community believes in, and our comprehensive plan specifically calls for, housing affordability at all income levels, including for underserved populations. And we believe in being, and our strategic plan specifically calls us to be, an inclusive, self-sufficient community. This project embodies those values, and I hope that you will support it, as the Planning Commission has recommended, because in the words of the ordinance before you, public necessity, convenience, general welfare, and good zoning practice require it. This project will provide at least 4 units of housing for adults with developmental disabilities, a population that is woefully underhoused in our community. And with the addition of low-income housing tax credits, it's likely to provide even more. Disability payments don't provide enough to rent an unsubsidized apartment in Charlottesville, and so people are forced to live in other parts of the state, far from the supports of family and friends. We all live in this community. We are all neighbors. The people who will be able to live in these apartments and won't have to leave town and all their support systems in order to find a place to live are our neighbors. Their families and friends who will be able to provide supports for their loved ones close to home are our neighbors. And the people who care about affordable housing for people with developmental disabilities are our neighbors. What happens in one neighborhood affects us all, and what's being proposed in this neighborhood could make this a better community for everyone. Hinton Avenue United Methodist Church doesn't just serve the people who live within a quarter mile of the church building. With this project, they are asking, along with the lawyer in the Bible, who is my neighbor? And like that lawyer, they have discovered that the correct answer is the one who had mercy on the person in need. I hope the City Council will take the unanimous recommendation of the Planning Commission and reach the same conclusion. Thank you.
Josh Carp.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Josh Karp, and I'm pretty afraid of public speaking, so forgive me for being nervous. I've lived in town about 6 years, and I'd like to continue living here if we can afford to do that. I think you've already heard enough good reasons to support this proposal unanimously, but I'd like to add one more, which is that housing policy is also climate policy. I believe you all care sincerely about reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. And if we don't build more multifamily dwellings that are walkable, that are central to downtown, we cannot possibly achieve the kinds of goals that you all supported earlier tonight. If my family is priced out of town, for example, we'll move into the county, we'll buy another car, we'll drive every day, and we'll live in a bigger place than we would otherwise. So I don't think it is possible both to support the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and to oppose the development of more dense multifamily dwellings. And I'd like to just comment, I've heard a lot of criticism, I've heard a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt tonight about this project. What I haven't heard is alternatives. And if you claim to support the development of more affordable housing, supportive housing, and walkable housing, and don't have a better idea, then either let's hear it or let's support this proposal. Thank you.
Alternative zoning.
Matthew Gillikin. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Matthew Gillikin. I live at 726 Orangedale. And I'd like to go on the record as saying I'd prefer for Kawhi Leonard to go to the Lakers.
My
and sign a
man.
2-year
My man.
The one-year option. I had to say that.
All right. You're good graces.
A little more seriously. I've worked for the last 13 years with people with developmental disabilities in different capacities. I worked at a group home in North Carolina for 2 years. I worked doing respite care for people with autism. And I've worked for the last 5+ years as a speech therapist. I currently work at UVA Hospital. And something I've observed over the years working with these folks is that it takes usually 3 things to make it so that the person with a developmental disability does well. It takes parents who advocate for them, it takes community members who partner with the parents in that advocacy, and it takes people in position of power to move the levers to make their lives better. We've already got a group of people who've come together to support parents of people with developmental disabilities. Now the ball's in your court. You're the people who are holding the levers of power right now. NCC zoning is not great. It doesn't fit well. Our zoning code in general is kind of a piece of trash. We've got to make the best we can with what we got, though. This seems to be, for this property at this time, the only way to move forward. These parents, people with developmental disabilities, this is a situation they find themselves in all the time. Our society is not set up for them. They do not have health care options that work out well for them. They don't have educational options that work out well for them. They don't have housing options that work out well for them. They don't have transportation options that work out well for them. This is an opportunity to provide housing for them in a way that's meaningful, with a supportive community, and a great location. I hope that you all support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Timothy, maybe Morton. Can't really read the last name. Timothy Morton, Martin. No? Okay. Dab Jackson. Dab Jackson. All right, Mark have it.
Mark Cabot. I want to be sure everyone understands that the opposition to this project
is not about the intended use. It's about the NCC zoning and the impact it can cause to neighbors. One only needs to look at last week's NDS report on the zoning violations of Southern Crescent to understand the neighbors' concern of NCC. I'm also going to make sure that everyone on this council, as well as the media, gets a copy of that report in case you haven't seen it yet. At that meeting, it was decided that the restaurant was in violation of proffers, probably been for many, many years. What action did NDC take? Southern Crescent was told to do a new application that they may be charged double what the application normally is as a penalty. This amounts to a slap on the wrist, and you wonder why the neighborhood is upset. My mother was a real estate broker. One of the things I remember her teaching me is that when it involves real estate, make sure your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed and that it's in writing. This is being left to good intentions. You must remember that the zoning stays with the property, and no matter who the owner is in the future. There are developers who are currently challenging proffers on the land that they have purchased. This notably is in Northern Virginia and even Albemarle County by Window Wood. The General Assembly of Virginia is aware of the need for change and are actively considering making changes. These changes will have no effect on the current proffers already in place, only future ones. Moss from Quality Pie recommended that a letter of ethical intent may help in solving some, but not all, of these concerns. Items that could be addressed is the intended use of the property while under control of the church, quality, quiet HVAC system, dumpsters, lighting, number of people living in per unit, just to name a few, and also maybe a review by BAR. Planning Commissioner Mr. Alejandro at the Planning Commission mentioned that the NCC zoning, I'm quoting him now, was the best that they had to deal with this request. What was needed was a different zoning for Hinton Church plus others that will probably follow, end of quotes. Let's give him the tools to work with. Let's give the board the tools to work with. We have been spending too many years with the zoning that we all know needs to be redone. It's time to stop shuffling our feet on this. Lately, we were waiting for the new city manager to come here. Well, we have the new city manager, and we need to get the city, comprehensive plan done. It's time to get this done. Neighborhood development has known about this issue for about 3 years for this church, and nothing has been brought forward to kind of meet their needs. You all have the power to do this. You could have it done by the next meeting that you all have. So it's up to you all to come up with a new type of zoning to take care of the church's needs and help with other churches that may have to follow through. Thank you.
All right, that's the last person who signed up. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Hi, my name
Good
is
evening.
Sarah Williamson. I will be brief. I live at 338 Monticello Road. I am a property owner and resident of Belmont. I live with my family in sight of the church, and I am here tonight in support of this proposal. I wrote a short email to the Planning Commission before they also brought it forward, approving it. I was also personally in support of this project when it did have some previously submitted limited commercial use proffers. I'm hopeful now that City Council and my neighborhood will be supportive of this project moving forward with the more restrictive proffers in place for non-residential use. I would like to see that there have been a number of other people speaking for my neighborhood who do not speak for me. I grew up in Charlottesville. When I moved back with my family, I moved to Belmont partly because of its character, which is not that of grandiose single-family houses. I moved because of the Belmont Market. I moved because there are already pre-existing small apartment buildings and mixed density situations. That is the character of the neighborhood as I see it. I see this project very much in line with that. I also am very much in support of an increased density of neighbors at low and extremely low income, and also with developmental disabilities. So I'd like to just, as a resident and property owner, give my approval and my request that you also approve this project. Thank you.
Kahn, City of Charlottesville, Belmont homeowner. I am here in favor of the Hinton project. One, what I've seen here today by the people who are opposing is that they're executing their privilege. Like they're seeing this project as an inconvenience to them, which is not the case, right? We cannot have parking, right? And people are more concerned about parking.
That's one point.
I don't care. You can just not talk to me. How about that? Parking. The church has ample parking, correct? Correct? Right. And so with the parking that the church has, that can be utilized, right, during various times of day. I don't see an issue with that. The idea about what type of complexities the folks who are going to be living there have is not relevant, right? If you're going to help somebody, you're just going to help them, right? You don't have to know the degree of their complexities to help. So I am in favor of the project, and I just want you all to also be in favor of that project as a Belmont homeowner. Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
It's me again.
Oh,
Eugene
you
Yost.
already been up, so it's only one time.
No, what?
Oh, it was
speaking about zoning.
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't know. I didn't know if you were up now. Just.
Is my 2 minutes start now?
Yep.
Okay. I think the reason we're here tonight is because the total failure.
And what's your name again?
Oh, sorry. Eugenio Scattini. Okay. I am a property owner in Belmont, and I've been living in the city for over 35 years. And I think the reason we're here tonight is because of the complete failure of our own zoning. That the church wants to do something very noble and honorable with their property, and the best they can do is to take the nearest zoning, NCC, and totally butcher it in a good way to suit their needs, and creating, in fact, a whole new zoning of an R4, since I think an R3 already exists. So there is no R4. So they're creating a new zoning to suit their needs out of the NCC, out of the carcass of the NCC. So I assume that the city council, their authority, can work some kind of agreement or deal with the church and with the Belmont people that you can create a new zoning that will affect that they can build their property or their project, and also takes the commercial aspect of the NCC out. That is what we're mostly concerned about, is the commercial aspect about future development in the area and turning Hinton Avenue in possibly a commercial corridor. I like to think of it as a Doppler effect, that once you drop the coin in a pool of water, the ripples start coming out, and then all the adjacent properties will be forced or pressured into converting into NCC until the new comprehensive plan comes out and maybe shed some new direction. Right now it's an open game as to developers coming in and seizing that opportunity and creating other NCC zones. So that's what we're fear of, is the expansion of the NCC to include all of Hinton Avenue. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
I'm Julia Williams. I live on 751 Belmont Avenue, right behind the church. And I do think many people in the community who are supporting the church are not understanding the neighbors' issue. It is not with the church's mission. It is with what the city has available as tools that, as Eugene said, would just be butchered to make this project happen. So I support previous statements about that. Also, using the Planning Commission and their vote as a justification to me is a little faulty. They are not professional planners. In fact, they themselves said they didn't have the right tools. So it isn't a compelling argument to then go ahead and pass it because, again, they're not professionals. And that kind of leads me to this. I think the city needs to be compelled to move as quickly as you can to get a long-range planner on board, to get consultants you need to give you professional criticism of options, to gather community input, get this
comprehensive plan working, get, what's the other piece of it? The housing strategy going, and let's get this 2003 zoning ordinance updated. It is ridiculous and it's embarrassing. One specific point about the proffers, well, maybe two. Proffer 5 says the city may require any site plan for any multifamily building proposed on the site to adhere to the vehicle ingress and egress. Two things. What does legal language mean when it says the city may require? It seems a little bit ambivalent. Also, why would we limit this right now? Wouldn't ingress on Hinton help with traffic flow and also help with traffic calming? So I think there's some things about the proffers that might need to be more seriously considered. And maybe it's, I don't know how you deal with that, because if you're going to proffer it, it's now required and you don't have the opportunity in site plan review to change it. So I'm a little skeptical at that. In proffer 7, it says the 10-foot maximum, but isn't that already part of the zoning? Why do you need to say 10-foot maximum if it's already in there? And then is there a way for the city, if we only have this tool and we can't move forward otherwise, and it is done under duress and possibly makes the proffers vulnerable, can the city do something? Can the attorney do something to support the community so that we know NCC will not become this, just spread all throughout the neighborhood, because it is definitely, we lose housing stock from that. Thank you.
Good evening. God bless you all for what you're trying to do. God bless you all. I have a question about the shelf life of the offer of affordable housing. I have heard it brought up in meeting after meeting that there is a lifespan of an offer of affordable housing. Sometimes it's 6 years, sometimes it's 10 years. Is this offer of affordable housing in perpetuity, or is there a shelf life?
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Good evening, Councilman and Chair Walker. I am Lois Sandy. I live in Albemarle County and have lived in the Charlottesville area since 1970. So I'm one of the very senior members of this room, I'm sure. I lived in Charlottesville City off JPJ for the first 3 years we were in Charlottesville. Moved to the county because that was affordable housing to us. Raised our children there and worked for the city schools for 25 years. I moved to speak because during those first 3 years in Charlottesville, I was a CNY nurse. I had the Belmont area. I had 100 families that I followed in Orangedale, which was supposed to be a nice new integrated community that turned out to be 90% black, 10% white. The Belmont area that I followed, patients' families that I visited in the Belmont area were in housing that was rather dilapidated even then. Along Garrett Street, just south of the city proper, there were outdoor toilets. There was, so over the years, I've seen enormous improvement in the Charlottesville city appearance. We have a long way to go in relationships. But one thing I am is an optimist. I have seen good things happen in the Belmont area, and the best thing that could happen would be for this council to approve housing for people who can't speak for themselves. And the positive outlook I have is that people in the neighborhood will be surprised and proud when the project is complete. Last I want to say is this Rachel's Haven effort initiative is asking for rezoning. It's not asking for millions of dollars. In fact, it's not asking council for a penny, as I understand it. Am I correct? I think I am. So it's, to me, to the benefit of all for the city council to approve the zoning. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? All right, closing the public hearing. All right, council.
Mayor Walker, can I ask the city attorney some questions? Could you please, Mr. Blair, clarify for the council and the community present the nature of these proffers and their longevity, how they convey upon sale, if that happens?
Sure, and also a few other questions, if you don't, or comments.
Go for it. Thank you.
Certainly.
And with the surrounding properties, being able to use the NCC designation is something.
Correct.
that's-
And the difference between R4 and NCC.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. A few things to go over. First, concerning Proffer 5, I know somebody mentioned that the language includes the word may. The reason that's in there is that it is possible once the site review is complete that that proffer may not, depending on the site plan, it's possible there may be another vehicular ingress and egress rather than the one spelled out in Chapter 5 that would be legally required. Again, that's more site-specific that we can't address right now, but the reason the word may is there is to provide some latitude in case there are issues during the site plan process. Councilor Galvin, you raise a question that's been asked and commented on a lot tonight. Zoning is the properties are found within a zone, and then there are uses within each zone. And each specific property has a zoning classification, and they are also pointed out in the comprehensive plan land use map. The zoning classification is the actual law. And I know there's been a lot of questions tonight about that in terms of enforceability. There's a Virginia Supreme Court case from 2001 called Jefferson Green Unit Owners Association versus Gwynn. That's the first time the Virginia Supreme Court said in black and white, proffers are in fact part of the zoning ordinance. It makes that exact statement. Proffers become part of the zoning ordinance. So proffers do carry the effect of law. To the mayor's question about other properties around this, let's say there's a rezoning tonight to NCC rather than its current zoning designation. That does not affect the other property's zoning designation around that property. Now, what would have to occur for those properties to be rezoned is the applicant, just like Rachel's Haven, would need to file a zoning map amendment, and then they would come before the Planning Commission and the council. I think, practicing land use law, understanding the process, it is worth noting to some of the concerns. While each property comes before you for a rezoning, one element that can be used in a rezoning as far as argument or persuasion is to say, well, you rezoned this property on Hinton Avenue to NCC. I'm right next door. Why won't you rezone my property to NCC? And the council simply has to have a rational basis to say, we rezoned Hinton United Methodist Church to NCC, but we're not going to rezone your property to NCC. And as long as there's some reason that's rational, and the Virginia Supreme Court calls that fairly debatable, you're on solid legal ground not to rezone to NCC. Concerning R4 zoning does not exist in our city code. R3 is what exists for possible multifamily rezonings. Mr. Haluska wrote a memo that was included in your packet. It's worth noting that R3 zoning, if a property is rezoned that. It does. Educational facilities and daycare facilities are by right in an R3 zoning. So you take a piece of property, you rezone it to R3, daycare facility can come there, and legally by right establish business there without any further special use permit. I do want to go over, I know there's been some talk about, well, these proffers state, proffer number 4, all non-residential uses other than educational facilities and daycare facilities which are not accessory to a house of worship or to residential uses located on the subject property shall be prohibited on the subject property. And you've heard tonight some individuals who have concerns about the enforcement of the zoning ordinance in the Belmont neighborhood. But it is worth pointing out that in addition to zoning administrator enforcing the proffer, if the concern is, well, these proffers aren't being enforced, any business in NCC could just pop up on the church property. Well, Section 14-11 of the City Code talks about business licenses. And in fact, the Commissioner of the Revenue, when they are approving business licenses, they have to, in fact, check the zoning classification. So I think in that instance, let's say this was rezoned to NCC and somebody wanted to open up a business on this particular property, I think the Commissioner of Revenue would check with the zoning administrator to say, hey, are there any issues with zoning? And if there's a proffer that says all non-commercial uses are prohibited, then in fact, they wouldn't get a business license from the Commissioner of Revenue. So that's an additional aspect to this beyond the zoning administrator enforcement when it comes to these proffers. If the issue is, could a business pop up at this church property if the house of worship use is extinguished?
Thank you.
And Mr. Blair, it was suggested by the city attorney's office that my understanding was that the reference to disabilities was not something we legally could include.
Well, that's typically, I think, well, you know, in terms of legally, can it be included? There are two different aspects to that. I think there's the enforcement aspect to disability, and that was a concern as to, yes, at that point, once you start to inquire under the Fair Housing Act, that then can become illegal. Once you start to inquire about an individual's status, whether it's disability. Interesting case out of Loudoun County last week about the size of a family. I know the Virginia Attorney General is now trying, because somebody was trying to move in a large family in a parcel in Loudoun County, they're trying to enforce the Virginia Fair Housing Act to say you can't ask about the size of a family in terms of the Fair Housing Act. So yes, legally, once you get to disability in the Fair Housing Act, that it has been part of our concern about using that term.
And I will just say briefly that I hear the concerns about, you know, parking. That's an issue that we are struggling with across the city. Also, recently, I sent an email to Dr. Richardson from a question I've asked in the past, but recently was asked to me by Ms. Teresa Price about where has all the affordable housing money gone in the past, and wanting to know where those units were and how we were monitoring whether developers were actually, keeping, in line with what they submitted during these requests. So, no, that is something that we are, working on, overall for developments, and understanding that it's going to have to be a key to make sure that the strategy, new comprehensive plan, that once they are in in effect, that we are holding people accountable to the best of our ability. So those are discussions that we are currently having.
Madam Mayor, I guess I have questions for the church, so, or it might be for the representatives from there about the finances of the project. So I don't know if I could ask whoever could speak to.
I will try to speak to it.
Okay, and thank you. And thank you, everybody. There's only been a few things that have had this many people show up, so. So I want to understand, because there's a moral argument that's being made to us, which is that there's a moral push behind this whole project, and I've been to impact meetings, and we've heard this kind of thing in the past. So I just want to, and we've acted on a lot of these. So I just want to understand a little bit more. So the part of the project that is the 4 units for developmentally disabled folks, I totally understand. Then there's the part that will be 4 to 6 units that'll be affordable, 80% or maybe lower, depending whether there's LIHTC credits that you successfully get. And those are different blocks.
Well, no.
15, are they the same?
So we intend to have 4 to 6 units for people with developmental disabilities. And if, as we've proffered, 4 units that are affordable, and if we only have those 4 affordable units, those 4 will be for the folks with developmental disabilities.
Okay. So then there will be what I want to understand is the 11 market rate units. So if this were, so you're going to have to take out loans to finance the construction, and then you'll have a mortgage to pay.
Well,
for all
our intention is to apply for low-income housing tax credits and not have to apply for a loan. If we apply for low-income housing tax credits, we're hoping, as I said in my presentation, that all of the units will be affordable, all 15, even though we're only proffering 4. But that depends on the low-income housing tax credits. And because we haven't applied and we haven't received them, we feel like we couldn't guarantee anything. So that's why we didn't put it in writing as a proffer. Was that answering your question?
Yeah, I mean, what I want to understand is what's the goal? So if you look at the finances, the pro forma of this entire project, is there a scenario where there's income on top of it balancing out so that you can do the units for the developmentally disabled folks, where there's extra revenue that's going into the church's coffers on top of what is what's supporting the developmentally disabled, or is it intended to be affordable housing forever? And is that the goal, or is part of what it's doing supporting the church's mission through revenue, which would be understandable? Churches do this all the time. They do developments, but they're two different things. If what we're being asked to do is support the church's ability to finance lots of other things the church does, which would be perfectly fine, that's different from financing, helping 4 developmentally disabled folks have apartments for a very long period of time.
Okay, now I understand what you're asking. Yes, this would not be an income stream for the church. The only financial benefit that the church is looking to get from this project is to be relieved of the care and upkeep for that part of their building that becomes the apartments. They will not be otherwise like profiting from this, and it will not be used even for other ministries.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess the question would be, so are I mean, this is why sometimes you would look at a pro forma of this and you would see the finances to try to understand, like, why couldn't, irrespective of LIHTC, why couldn't those just be low-income apartments forever? Because and then that's because the
like
cost is too.
All 15,
sure.
Or
yeah.
We haven't figured out how to financially make that possible. And let me add, as Pastor Robert has said, that we are a church. We've never done this before.
Right.
So I may have to
call on my helper here. I'm a social worker by background, so some of these words I don't even understand what you're saying. But I do understand mortgages and that we can't have them all be affordable if we don't get the low-income housing tax credits. We would need some kind of income to pay off a mortgage.
Well, the income would come from the rent. I mean, it would.
Well,
be-
if they're affordable rents, I'm not sure. I mean, again, I'm not a math person, but I'm not sure that we would have the income to pay off a mortgage.
Well, so this would be what, these are pretty normal questions to ask. It would say, well, what, at the very worst, if the revenue that was coming in to pay for the project was just low-income rents, it was 15 low-income housing units that the church wanted to build, which is awesome, that would be the revenue that would pay for the construction costs on land that's vacant right now. So why doesn't that work, would be the question that I think we're wanting
Maybe
to-
it would work. We've never had like somebody look at that for us.
So I think that's an important question, because we're being asked to get involved in a project that not only is doing the 4 units for developmentally disabled folks, which everybody agrees should happen. There's a whole other piece here, which is, are they, anyway, I think I've been clear. That's a piece of information that I would like to have, but I may not be in the majority here.
I guess I have a question too, to follow up on Councilor Signer. So, do you have an experienced developer who is a partner in your group?
The community services
So
housing.
they are experienced in development
Yes.
work.
Yes.
So, and we saw the letters, they came in, so thank you very much. And that was my understanding, that was your developer partner.
Yes. We're in, nothing is signed at this point, but yes, it is our
But there's a
intention
letter
to
of
move forward
intent
with that.
to be in
Yeah.
partnership. And so that, and I did meet with Kim and another member of her congregation, and I did ask for these kinds of letters so that we had something to go on. So that's just full disclosure. So now, who is going to be, now this application puts the church as the owner of the property. Is this going to continue to be the owner of this project? Is the church the owner of this
I may need
project?
to get Pastor Robert to help me with that question, because it gets complicated. There is an answer.
And if I can, I'll get my district superintendent to speak.
Okay.
So my understanding,
Oh, I can tell you it is now, because his head is in his hand.
yeah, my understanding is that all Methodist Church property is held by the local congregation in trust for the entire denomination, with the intent that, say, we have a theological dispute, get angry, we don't get to walk away with our church building. The Methodist Church has a vested interest in having ministry in Belmont, in a sense, irrespective of our congregation. But we are the ones entrusted to be doing that now and in perpetuity. So part of our difficulty in working this project out and in figuring out the financing is that really literally we cannot mortgage that property in such a way that it would be given away to a developer if it were foreclosed.
Okay.
That is one reason that this scheme with the LIHTC credits is so attractive to us. We are in communication with our conferences lawyers who understand these things far better than any of us in this room do. And the intention is to find a way to condominiumize the property and sign like a 99-year lease that would enable the Methodist Church to retain overall control while whatever nonprofit entity is necessary to be created for this project to do that. Our church is not going to be the entity that does that, but we will continue to hold the site for the whole Methodist Church, and if we fail, then, as we've said, the Charlottesville District will step in and will find some other way to keep ministry happening in that location. I think, sorry, I had another point that Kim raised, and it's gone, and I'm sorry, I wanted to clarify it, but I've lost it. But I'll hang around in case I can help.
It'll come back. It'll come back.
It will.
And while you all are figuring out financing, I would just like for you to keep in mind that the city does, support local projects, and some I think are not are not as promising as this one. And so just keep that in mind when you're talking about the affordability piece, and make sure that you discuss with us how, how we could potentially participate.
Thank you, Mayor Walker. And I do remember my other point, and it relates.
Told you it was going to come back.
It would. You got me, Wes. When we started this conversation, our first approach was to the city about affordable housing funding. And at that point, we discovered that as a faith organization, we would probably not be eligible for those funds. But if we can create whatever instrument needs to be created, that may yet be a possibility. I think certainly in our minds, and as not the experts here, but in our minds, part of the difficulty of this whole thing is that rezoning of this parcel so that this congregation can give this property is the key to the whole thing. The Charlottesville district was raising funds, from scratch, and has about $200,000 so far, from which they were going to try to purchase property and build from scratch and go through all of these hoops. And an initial partner that we started out with fell through way back. Thanks to threatened cuts to Medicare and so forth. So when our church stepped forward, we began to see a possibility. But if zoning is a no-go, then it's back to square one for everything else. And my sense, and Jennifer can correct me, is that to put this application in for the LIHTC funding, we need to know that this is indeed the site, and we need to know that the zoning is available. Otherwise, we can't put in the request for funding.
Yeah, we just went through several.
So that's the circle of our thinking, and why we don't have all of our ducks in a row, because some of the ducks are chickens and others are eggs. But.
Thank you. On that note, let's button this one up, man. Let's on that note.
So any further?
So I think we can just discuss now.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Call the
I think
question.
we're
Thank
good.
you.
We're not.
All right.
I want to acknowledge, I understand the frustration of the residents and what they're facing. We have had a lot of precedent set very poorly with enforcing proffers historically, and how we're even handling, more of our operational things. And so I certainly, why are you laughing at me?
No, I'm sorry. I was just listening, and I was thinking about something else.
Okay. I'm just trying to acknowledge, I certainly hear where they're coming from. I also see that we are in a situation where, I guess as the director of NDS said, our wastebasket of errors that we have in our zoning is where we're at. And I'm very frustrated with how long, and Ms. Galvin can comment on just the timeline it's taken us to get to, and we still aren't even there to a point where we really are able to rewrite our zoning so that we don't find ourselves in these circumstances time and time again. At the same time, it's not to the fault of the applicant and what they're trying to accomplish. I mean, and I feel like I'm echoing, I know that our planning commissioners find themselves in the same place. And so I'm really committed to partnering with our city manager and looking at what can we do to improve our processes overall so that we're not hearing this again and again from our community members, and that we have a system in place to reinforce the decisions that have been made in the past, because I agree wholeheartedly that has not been the precedent set. I do see here, though, that the proffers that have been offered relative to use are very clear, and I see it as a really uphill battle for anyone to do anything differently than the residential use. Whereas in the other situations, there was a commercial use that was allowable, and those other proffers, are very specific to those uses. And so I do see them as different circumstances than we have here. And I know that we're not taking a formal, just for the public's knowledge, we aren't taking a vote tonight. This is a first of 2 readings, and so there obviously is always opportunity. Isn't that correct, Mr. Blair?
Yes.
With SUPs, it's a one-shot, so it won't be till our August meeting, and obviously people can continue to weigh in, but in the interest of the fact that we have 12 items on our agenda, I was hoping we could just kind of share our piece a bit and be able to move on.
And this is item number 1.
But we can support.
I was just saying it y'all just think I'm always
We can support
joking.
moving it, though, to the consent.
But
Yes, you can.
I would like to make some comments, though. I think
Okay.
it's really important that we acknowledge the intensity of the feelings on both sides of this issue. And at the same time, we have a broken system, and there's no doubt about it. And I've been trying for 7 years to try to change it. 2 resolutions to change it. Nothing happened. We're at a point now on the cusp of success because we have a request for proposal out on the street where we are going to have the comp plan update and an affordable housing strategy and the rezoning rewrite all rolled into one. And we have to have this long-range planner in place so that there's somebody that can monitor it and own this process and get it done. I'm determined to get it done in the next 5 months before I leave council. I can't believe it's taken me 8 years to do this. So, and it's not done yet. So, I mean, hold the applause. But the point of the matter is that you look at the whole comp plan. This NCC does not fit in the future land use plan, period. It just doesn't. And I can understand where the fear is coming from. But those proffers are real. They are on the site plan. They convey with that property. When we do the rezoning, we can fix the zoning designation so that it makes sense and it's real, so that NCC goes away. But we have to do something now. And I say that because the other parts of the comp plan, this project meets fantastically well. It's one of the best projects I've ever seen in these 8 years. And I say that because it's dealing with not only housing, it's dealing with environmental sustainability, because the greenest building ever built is one that's already there, and it's adaptively reusing it as well as expanding on an existing site that is already developed. It's not a greenfield site. You aren't sprawling into the landscape. You're already there. And it meets our preservation and urban design goals as well. You can see the building, the drawings that were done are beautiful, and they're very thorough. We're looking at things tonight where we just have a scratch on a piece of paper. So I applaud you for the thoroughness with which you're submitting this project when you don't have your pro forma worked out yet. So you put an investment already in this. But I think that the only thing clearer would have been a form-based code. But essentially, this project is like that missing middle housing type that we talked about. It's that middle ground multifamily housing that is happening, but it's in front of you. You can see it. It's no surprises. Now, there is a justification for this change, and we've seen that over the years too. 2015 was the RCLCO housing study. 2018, we got the housing needs assessment. On and on. We know affordable housing is a critical, acute problem now. In 2014, a staff memo admitted that zoning, in 2014, our zoning was not meeting the needs for affordable housing. And yet, we still haven't quite changed that yet. So then when you look at the, what's the problem with this kind of hybrid? It is a hybrid zone between R3 and NCC. And that's why they've come up with this new nomenclature. I loathe the fact that we have to use this, believe me. But I do say to you now, I'm committed to not let it creep the rest of the corridor. The church is already not in conformance with single-family zoning. It's already an institution. So that is just simply making a better use of that parcel. And that also is a goal of the comprehensive plan, to better utilize our gray field sites, our underdeveloped sites. Now, way back in September 17, 2018, I asked for a comprehensive solution to the parking problem generated by the high-intensity mixed-use commercial corridor zoning in the middle of a residential area. Unfortunately, Mr. Zyberk did not get that memo. So we don't have anything in writing tonight that's helping us figure out this parking, and the parking challenge is real. But having said that, I would like to then, as we move forward with this project, that we direct our city manager to really take a serious look at the parking issue holistically in this area and what can be done, from shuttles to valet parking to shared parking agreements. And if we need to have counselors meet with property owners in order to get this moving, I'm willing to do that. But we got to start working on that parking issue.
Okay.
But I also want to just say, I want to make sure that the residents of Belmont know that I think you've been unfairly criticized for being NIMBYs. I think it's right. I think what is happening is that you are really fed up with the zoning, as I have been fed up with the zoning. And I hear you. I think most of us hear you. We are going to change that. But right now, this is one of those projects that is compelling because it does so many other things right. And this is the only way to get it. The R3, it eats up too much land in setbacks. It requires on-site amenities that eats up more land. And it pervades changes all over the city. We'd have to do a zoning text amendment first before we can even then have you apply for an R3. Because right now, the R3 doesn't really work for that site. Okay. So I already checked that out. It's not workable right now. So I just want to commit to you that I do approve this project. It is compelling. It doesn't comport with that NCC, as you say, the carcass. It's been hollowed out. It's supposed to be a commercial center. He took all the commercial uses out of it, so it's a carcass. Right. And then making sure that we get that RFP out and selected, and that long-range planner hired. That's a priority. It's got to be.
All right, thank you. All right, so is there agreement to move this to the consent for the next meeting? All right. All right, thank you. And we're gonna have a quick 5-10 minute break. 5. All right, 5.